Good morning, diners, and welcome to a special edition of the Collapse Morning Wake-Up Call here on the Doomstead Diner. And this Sunday morning, although I had some other things that I was hoping to discuss, and I may still do that, but what we had go on this week in the climate and weather category of collapse was pretty intense, and it continues to be intense. It hasn't stopped. What we had was an outbreak of tornadoes across Tornado Alley, which goes all the way from Texas up to the Dakotas and then goes east through Missouri, and these days it keeps working its way further east. They had tornadoes in Pennsylvania and Maryland, as well as tornado warnings in New York City, although I don't believe one touched down there. Nevertheless, about 200 that I have been aware of, watching the weather services and so forth, have been recorded with numerous touchdowns, some of them horrific in their destruction in various places. And that is fast collapse occurring in real time to these people. The storm chasers, the stuff is fabulous to watch. I've got storm chaser video and whatnot going on behind me. This is from a tornado that hit in Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 2011. So it's not a current, one of the current crop of tornadoes, but there's a lot of good video out there too on this. But it's the frequency here. Again, not that tornadoes are anything super special in Tornado Alley. I mean, even when I was a trucker, I ran into a tornado in Oklahoma on the Texas border. And, I saw trucks right next to me flipped over in a rest stop that I got into early. And I had 40,000 pounds of beer in my trailer, and between that and trailers on either side of me in the rest stop, I didn't get flipped, but I felt it, and it was one of the most frightening moments of my life, and it lasted 15-20 seconds of really bad stuff, but once it was over and the shaking stopped and all the rest, I got out of my truck and there it was, just mayhem everywhere around me. And I think that one was probably pretty small, and I don't think it was a direct hit even. But some of these places have been simply flattened by direct hits. And those people who live in those places, well, the video is fantastic to watch. I mean, these people's lives have been, in many senses, destroyed. And, the comment is, I thank God I'm alive, and, I still have my life, everything else is replaceable, etc., etc., etc. You hear the same commentary all the time from the newscasters as well as from the people who were actually impacted by it. I'm just thankful to be alive, etc. But maybe you'd be better off dead, because getting your life rebuilt after one of these things is extraordinarily difficult, and it becomes more difficult all the time. I also was perusing the results of Hurricane Michael, which hit the Florida Panhandle last year. And Michael basically destroyed the south coast there of the Panhandle. You know, Air Force Tyndall Air Force Base was pretty much destroyed. It was a major employer in the area. The few resort cities were pretty much destroyed as well, and their tourist business this year is not going to be too good. I mean, they don't even have fucking hotel rooms, you know, and rental properties. And then for the people who live and work there, they're lower class people, a lot of agricultural workers and so forth. And FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security and everybody else who's responsible for handing out aid to these people has been slower than their usual slow. We're getting into the next hurricane season. In fact, it just began. June 1st is the beginning of hurricane season in the Atlantic. And in the Gulf of Mexico, there's already something spinning up. We don't know yet if it's going to impact the fascist states of America, but you know, it just indicates that we got a lot of action coming down the pipe from Mother Nature as we proceed along here. And tornado season isn't over either yet. So, you know, all of these, I called them in a series that I wrote on the diner on my blog, the Strafing Run of Mother Nature. And that's what it is. It was, in that case, a train of hurricanes that came and hit the FS of A, including Michael, and I don't remember the names of the other ones. But they hit South Florida, and I think one hit along the coast, the southern coast of the Atlantic. And, you know, there was damage widespread everywhere, up and down the coast. And the thing is, you know, how do you repair this stuff? How do you keep doing it over and over and over again? And that's really the problem. And there is a bill in Congress for aid, which goes back as far as the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. And they're still suffering under the effects of that. And this money, which really comes in the form of loans, it's not gifts, and that's a whole other story. But even dispersing this money is held up now because repugnant congressmen have stood in the way of it, because we've got supposedly a national emergency going on the border with Mexico, and they want funding for a border wall before we give our Americans, our fellow citizens in theory, a helping hand here to recover from tornadoes and hurricanes and floods and shit that happened last year. Okay, they're still not getting any money, and the communities are still devastated, and populations are leaving, and as populations leave, that means their utility companies have less revenue, their tax base decreases, and the overall economics of the neighborhood gets destroyed. You know, even in the areas that have an economic base of, say, tourism, who's gonna do the work in the tourista hotels? Who's going to be the maids? Who's gonna work in the restaurants, etc., etc., etc.? You need housing for these people. The housing isn't there. I mean, it's flattened. It's gone. It's history. So, you know, this is what we see ongoing. And again, with the tornadoes, they're very photogenic, you know. I mean, you just watch this shit, you know. I mean, that's fucking amazing. I mean, that tornado was a mile wide. And it just went smack through the middle of Tuscaloosa. And 250 people died. But that's, super dramatic. What's going on, what's ongoing here is a slow motion disaster that's moving its way down the Arkansas River, down the Mississippi River, and as of today, watching some more video, there have been more levee overtoppings and levee breaches in Alton, Illinois, and West Alton, Missouri, which is, if you know the area, is just north of St. Louis. And if you recall some past history of political shit that went on, Ferguson, Missouri is actually up in this area, and probably is at least very wet right now, even if it's not completely flooded. But the actual crest of the Mississippi in that neighborhood isn't due till Tuesday, and that's a few days away, and the water's already overtopping, and it's in places there are levee breaches, so the water's just pouring in. It's just pouring in, and this is going to happen not just in St. Louis. It's going to happen all the way down the Mississippi River. To the major communities that sit on there as the wave of water moves down into those communities. So, Memphis and West Memphis, Tennessee will get it, and eventually it's going to make its way down to Baton Rouge and NOLA, New Orleans. And, if that comes in combination with a king tide or with additional rainfall in that neighborhood at the same time, those levees, they're pretty beat up stuff. The Army Corps of Engineers has supposedly done repair work on them over the years since Katrina and so forth, but how many times can these man-made structures absorb the pressure and the velocity of the water as it moves through? That's a lot of water, folks, when the Mississippi fills up. And it, you can't stop it. It's not within the physical capabilities of Homo sap at this point, at least in terms of cost. I mean, if you had endless amounts of money and so forth, and could renew and rebuild and build bigger and build better all the time, maybe you could do it. But that's not reality. Reality is that the energy that it costs to do all this building and all the materials that it requires, material movement, and so forth, you can't do it, especially as the frequency of the events increases and the intensity of the events increases. And that's what's happening. So, we have this problem ongoing. And, it's not really being addressed. In fact, it's being actively denied and ignored by a significant portion of the leadership of this country, on, mainly on the repugnant side, and our clown-in-chief, Donald Dietrich Trumpovetsky. These people are deniers of what is in plain sight. This is not any kind of, hidden thing anymore, or, it's going to happen next year. So, it's happening fucking now. And it's time to address it. But so far, the addressing of it amounts to not even helping out the people who are most affected with a little bit of cash, and if you can't do that, then the whole system is fucked eventually, which it is. But it's just a matter of how how fast this all progresses. And that's something that we keep track of on the diner and on the collapse morning wake-up call, and why these things are important to keep track of. You know, it's not just the politics, it's not just energy, it's not just the banking system and economics, and it's not just rising sea levels, which probably will take a little while to kill everybody off. It's what's happening right now, right here, and for those of us who live here, right here in our own patch of the earth, the North American continent. But that's not to say the same shit isn't happening all over the rest of the globe. It is. And as that happens, there is migration of people trying to leave one area that's been a disaster in the making or already occurred or whatever, trying to get the fuck out of Dodge there and trying to get somewhere else where life is still doable. And so you've got these migration problems going on, and that's an outgrowth partially of political processes, partially of population overshoot, and too many people trying to occupy the space in too many places on the earth, and partially due to effects of climate change. All those things are coming together now, and we see the results of that, and for the most part as a society we're still not prepared for it. But here in the diner we want to keep you aware of what's going on. I don't have a solution to the problem, I'll tell you that myself, but I do watch it, I do keep track of it, and it's my job to deliver the message to you, and you probably don't want to hear, which is that you are living in and witnessing the collapse of industrial civilization. And that's all to do. This time, until next time, here on the Collapse Morning Update of the Doomsday Diner. And please join us inside the diner. You'll find the URL for our forum in the scrolling credits. Hasta la tornado.